tell you a couple of things about me. I'm involved in tech today, but if you look at me from an education background perspective, you may be surprised to learn that I didn't even properly graduate from school. Okay?
Sure.
I wasn't interested in academics. It bored me. Never went to college. Okay? So, to a large extent, everything that I've learned, I don't have a college degree also, by the way, and that's official. To a large extent, whatever I learned, I basically learned myself. And the big difference between having gone and done a degree, and I said, God forbid I had actually gone and done a degree, because in the early years, you were asked very early in life, what do you want to be? You want to be a doctor, engineer, pilot, sure. Join the police, the army, whatever. And if I had chosen any one of those paths, then I would have been shoehorned into one box, and that's where I would have been. So since I didn't go, I've had to study all my life. And since I've had to study all my life, I've had the privilege of being able to understand not just one phase of technology, but being able to dip into anything that was required at any moment in time. The big advantage of that is it gave me the ability to be able to look at things maybe a little more differently than most people, in the sense that I started my first business, I think it was in 1986. So I was at that time 24 years old when I started my first company.
Sure.
And that company also came from solving a problem. So what I've learned through all the companies that I've been through and all the companies that I've formed, I said that what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Because if you don't have a problem that you're trying to solve, then you're just wishful thinking. Secondly, if the problem that you're solving is someone willing to pay for it. Because if no one is willing to pay for it, then it's not a business. If it is so simple and people are willing to pay for it, why hasn't somebody else done it? Okay, and then is it scalable? We visited Kigali in 2015, and they have an event there called Transform Africa. So the government at that point in time said that, look, you come from Singapore, which is a smart city. We want to be the Singapore of Africa. Can you replicate some of the smart city projects here? So I said, I don't believe in cut and paste, because what Singapore needs has got nothing to do with your needs. So I need to understand what are your pain points. So we looked at many different verticals, and one of them, which for them was the biggest challenge, was the transportation sector. And they told me that in 2014 they had tried to take the motorcycle taxis off the road. Now, just to give you a size of scale, you have in Kigali, which is the capital city, 600 taxis, but you have 20,000 motorcycle taxis. You have 700 buses. So you can imagine that what do the people in Kigali use? It's obviously the motorcycle taxi. Now, to be able to bring about some kind of organization into this industry that they had tried to shut down, we had to understand what exactly was their reason for wanting to shut it down. So the first reason they gave us is that the large number of motorcycle accidents and the number of people who die is in the motorcycle accidents was very high. We said, how high? They said 80% of the accidents involve motorcycle taxis, 90% of the casualties are on because of motorcycle taxis. The second challenge they told us is that they said that we have very little visibility into where these people are, how they operate, and we find that also whatever little crime that's happening in our city is happening is caused by these motorcycle taxis. So we understood that from a government's point of view. Then we went to the other side, to the passengers, and asked them, what are your problems? And the passengers said, well, we have to negotiate the fare every time, and it's difficult for us because if we are from out of town, or we can't speak the local language, or I have a different colored face or skin, I get charged 4 or 5 times as much.
Sure. So
we said, okay, so a fixed fare or the fact that there is no fare metering is another problem. Then they came up with the fact that very often they don't have change, and they give the driver 2,000 francs, and he said, I'll give you the change, and he runs away.
Okay.
We went to the drivers and we asked them, what are your problems? And they came up with the reverse. They say many times passengers take them, especially at night after having a few drinks, and they run away without paying them. And they say that we also don't like it when we have to negotiate every time, because we always feel we could have got more. So those were the key issues that were brought up in the surveys that we did. Then came to a very interesting part of our survey. Imagine a country where an infrastructure is running, but there is no fixed price. Tomorrow you want to legislate some kind of price on what basis? So we actually had people make thousands of trips by sitting at the back of a motorcycle, carrying the meter to calculate the actual distance, but negotiating with the driver and then writing down, I went from point A to point B. I negotiated through 700, but it was X number of kilometers and our meter showed so much. So we then made a complete database of point A to point B, distance versus what was actually being paid. So you then began to understand what is it that the passenger today is willing to pay, what is it that the driver is willing to accept. Because you can't abstract and bring an absolute model and say, now from tomorrow it will be like that. It's not going to work. So most people look at us and basically say that, oh, you're an Uber. And I said, absolutely not. I said, Uber's in a different kind of business, because I think what Uber does is somebody gives them maybe $10 million every day and they stand on the streets and they hand them out. And how do they hand them out? They incentivize the driver to be able to take rides, and then they incentivize the passenger to be able to use the app. The ability to be able to delete an app or to be able to remove an app, you know how much time it takes you on the phone. So I don't understand that business model, and they are basically providing something which is useful in a big city like London, when you have to go outside and you want to get a cab and you want to get it quickly and you want it cheaper than the London cab. Maybe you can call an Uber. I don't have the Uber app downloaded on my phone. I don't intend to, but I have different reasons for it. So people look at us and say that you're a ride-hailing app or you're an aggregation app, and I said, no, we are not. I said, that's the precursor. That's how we come in. So imagine a country like Rwanda, you've got 45,000 motorcycles there, right? We're bringing in 45,000 meters, which are what? Which are hardened Android devices, purpose-built to do a metering function. At the back of them is the enablement of taking NFC payments. Now what I've got suddenly is I've got an infrastructure play where I've got 45,000 people in the country. I know where they are. They have an intelligent device and they have been trained, and now they can basically be used as an agent for anything, for agency banking, for airtime top-up, for payment of electricity bills. So they can basically take on any agency networking kind of thing. So if there's any startup that wants to leverage it and wants to come and say, listen, I need to have 200, 5,000, 20,000 agents, they're already there. You have to only go through our API to be able to access it. The other big thing is that imagine that in any city in the world, any person who has got, especially an African city in the world, any person who is an handyman, so he's an electrician, he's a plumber, he's a mechanic or a healthcare giver, what is the circle of influence? It would only be the people who have his phone number. And this is not the smartphone. In Kigali, you can Google and say plumber. I mean, you're not going to find a listing of plumbers, right? You don't have that already. Google hasn't done that. Nobody else has come and done that. So somebody needs to do that hard work. So circle of influence is only people who already know him. Most of the time, he's sitting idle. 60% of the time, the motorcycle drivers are not only sitting idle, but they're driving up and down the road looking for a ride. There is obviously some need for a plumber somewhere. Why can't we now connect all three? Why connect the plumber to someone who needs to get a wash basin fixed or whatever? But I facilitate it by basically getting a prepayment for the ride, sending a motorbike which is close to the plumber, picking him up and delivering him within a quantified period of time. The person does whatever he has to do, he takes his payment, but I deliver him another ride to be able to take him back because I've already charged the customer for that. The customer has the ability to be able to rate it, and the customer doesn't need a smartphone to be able to do this searching and calling, because data is expensive and people don't have smartphones. So we're setting up a call center that will operate 24/7. People call in, toll free, tell us what we want. The agent responds and says, I've got 5 plumbers who are free right now. These are the ratings, these are the specialities, this is the minimum charge, do you willing to pay? The person says yes, the person pays, we dispatch the person, we get feedback. If the person doesn't behave himself, then we have ways and means of counseling him or dealing with him. So what we are interested in doing is in creating an ecosystem which will basically facilitate businesses to grow, whether you're an individual or you're a small business. The other thing that we are doing is that we are creating, because of all the analytic data that we are creating, from all these 45,000 drivers, we are basically creating a database. And that database gives them a credit score. Based upon that credit score, banks are now willing to loan money. And when banks are willing to loan money back to these guys, we are begging these guys, please leave the motorcycle industry. Right. Now you can turn around to me and say, but isn't that counterintuitive? You are running this business. Yes. No, I am not running the motorcycle business. Yeah. Tomorrow it could be the taxi, it could be the bus, it could be a train, it could be a subway. We have all the tech for that. What we're trying to do is to solve a social problem. If you take all of these guys off the road, you'll get criminal elements. We need to give them a safe exit. We need to give them an alternative way of living. Our intent is basically a much broader play where we are saying that, look, let's facilitate these people, let them earn money with dignity. That's what all of us want. They're all willing to work hard. But let them exit this overcrowded system, which is unsafe for them and unsafe for everybody else on the road. One of the biggest challenges, I think, is the fact that you're going into an area where people do not have the experience of handling expensive electronic devices. Sure. So the first thing they say is, how can I steal it? Or how can I use it? Or can I open it? Can I remove the SIM? Yeah. Can I re-flash it and turn it into a phone? And if you told them that, oh, you know, it's waterproof, so the guy says, okay, let me leave it in a bucket of water all night. Or we actually had one guy take a brand new device from us and then jump on it with his shoe till he cracked the screen because we told him it was a rugged device. So there's a lot of learning which came from that. The other thing which we find is that about 10% of the people that we train get it, because it's not easy. There's a lot of menus, there's a lot of depth. You need to understand basic mathematics, some amount of finance. What's it, you know, we don't say debit and credit, but we're still teaching him about finance. How much money do you owe us? How much money do we owe you? You know, to be able to look at all the settlements. So we're doing that financial education, but we're also forcing them to open bank accounts and mobile money accounts and to also get into the saving aspect of it. But the big challenge that we've had from them is pushback of saying, no, we want to stay with cash. And then explaining to them is why cash is not good, because they can't plan, they can't save. So, you know, if God forbid he has an accident, then what's he going to do? Where's he going to get the money from? He doesn't have personal insurance. Then getting these guys to basically understand the value of the system in the initial stages was people would basically not understand what is a meter, why should it work. Then they were fearful that the passengers wouldn't want to get on, wouldn't want to pay by meter. So there was I would say that depending on the individual, we've had very varied experiences. And there's been a long learning or a lot of learning on different aspects of dealing with these people. But I personally feel that we were told that, look, oh, they're all criminals and they're bad people, and I haven't found a bad person. No. Some people are more difficult to deal with. Some people are more abrasive. But there's no bad person there. I mean, they're all willing to work hard. They work 10, 12 hours a day anyway. It's difficult to say how much impact we've had so far, but all I can say is that our intention of what we're going to provide to the drivers and to the families is very clear. The first thing that we want to do is basically we want to be able to provide through our kind of guaranteed credit score the ability for the person who is today predominantly the male in the family who's driving the motorbike, loans that he can give back to the family to be able to start some other kind of business, which he would later join. So we're empowering women in one way. The first is that we created a completely different category. Okay? Because when we when we thought of the entire concept, we didn't stop at just, okay, let's solve some problems that the government has, something that the passenger has, something that the driver has, but we took a holistic approach and we created a completely different category in terms of making a platform. That was the first. The second, I think, was to successfully do a proof of concept, because the government told us, very nice PowerPoint presentation, thank you very much. Of course, we are very interested, and then see you again sometime. They didn't think that we would sit there, because they didn't see us every day or every month for a few months, because we were hard at work in the field. And when we came back and we told them that now we are going to be launching the proof of concept, they said, really? They said, we thought you'd given a PowerPoint presentation and disappeared. So doing a successful PowerPoint presentation with our own investment, and doing it without any approval or any guaranteed of return or whatever, I think the proof of concept proved to us also that we were on the right track, because we got an uptake without there being any dictate from the government itself. The third thing I would say is getting the government to believe in our solution, to being the first government in the world to change the law to make it mandatory for every motorcycle in the country to have the meter, and put very heavy penalties if you drove around without a meter or if you didn't use a meter. It's almost a day's earnings if you don't use the meter even in one instance. I think the fourth thing is then being the first company in the world to have got a license to operate. We work with MTN, with Tigo, with Airtel, and we have a relationship with Equity Bank. But I think this is an ecosystem that's going to grow, because we are going to be open, we are going to be agnostic, we're not going to play favorites. I think it's a community play. And now you've got the continental free trade area. So hopefully borders will open, visas and travel and all of that will happen. So I'm just hoping that the regulators come on board. And the success, I think, for all tech companies all over Africa is going to be based on being able to access larger markets in a more seamless manner, because today everybody operates in an island. You look at M-Pesa. M-Pesa is extremely successful in Kenya. They went to Tanzania, didn't succeed, but they're nowhere else on the continent, right? So what we've got is we've got islands of ingenuity, you've got islands of high-tech development, but the inability to be able to scale. So you're not going to see a WhatsApp or a Facebook or something else come out of Africa unless that market scale is available. Still in Africa, for sure. Possibly in Kigali, but still in Africa for sure. I think in the next 10 years, my kids don't like me for it, but I say at least the next 10 years in Africa. Thing that I think for any entrepreneur wanting to come back to Africa, is it the right time? Absolutely. Is it the right place? Absolutely. Is it the land of opportunity? I think more than even America. But you have to be very careful. It's not easy to do business. Every country is very diverse in the way in which it works. It's not all transparent as to how business works and why decisions are made. You have to double think your business plan, and I think you need to find a mentor who has worked in that particular market. And most important thing I think which people don't do is, and that's why businesses fail, is they don't do an in-depth market survey. They don't do product testing. They try to get money quickly, and then they will fail because there's no uptake. So if you've done your business model, you create the minimum viable product, take it to the market, get the critical feedback. Even if people say, I don't want it, I'll never use it, whatever, get that feedback. If you need to pivot and change, do that, right? But don't, just because you get funding or whatever, don't let your head go into the clouds. That's the biggest challenge. I find these youngsters at 19, 20, 21, 22 get $5,000 and believe that now, I'm the next Facebook. It doesn't work like that, no.